Imagine someone who laughs at your jokes, shakes your hand, and looks you in the eye, while hiding a darkness so deep it breaks your brain. Psychopaths aren't monsters in the shadows. They're the neighbor who waves from his porch, the coworker who charms the boss, the smiling face that makes children clap with joy right before the unthinkable happens. But what separates them from the rest of us? Is it violence? A lack of emotion? Or is it something much more sinister than that? There was a clown who smiled as he killed, a billionaire who built her empire on lies, and a prophet who turned prayer into a weapon. 3 real horror stories that expose a terrifying truth. Psychopathy isn't about losing control, it's about taking it. By the end, you'll never trust a smile the same way again. Children adored him, parents trusted him. Parties hired him to paint butterflies on young faces. But beneath a rainbow wig, this psychopath hid a truth more frightening than any nightmare. For years, he buried victims under his floor. Some so close to the surface, neighbors, without realizing it, could smell their rotting bodies. And the scariest part? No one noticed a thing. John Wayne Gacy wasn't born a monster. He was made. His childhood was a blueprint for psychopathy. He had an abusive father who beat and belittled him daily, and a mother who tried to shield him from that violence. He was socially isolated, had a range of health issues, and was sexually molested by a family friend throughout puberty. By 11, John was torturing birds and frogs. By 18, he'd moved on to cats and dogs. And yet, to the outside world, Gacy was just another ambitious kid. He ran a construction business.
He was a very nice man to work for, and he liked the kids. And my son told me he was a politician, and he says, boy, if you stick with that guy, you could go far. He's got a lot of connections. See, and this is what the boys liked about him.
Volunteered as a clown at children's hospitals.
I enjoyed it. You know, I wasn't getting paid for it. I just enjoyed it.
He even worked as a Democratic precinct captain, shaking hands, kissing babies, all while hiding his darkest urges.
But if I was in a bad mood, it was bad for me to be a clown. Because some of those kids can be little bastards, you know? You know, you want to grab them by the cheek, and instead of just, you want to whack the shit out of them.
Then, in 1972, a teenage boy vanished, then another, and another. Gacy had moved on from animals. Now he was killing kids in cold blood. He buried most of his victims beneath his house, under the floorboards or in the garden. The smell grew so bad employees and neighbors complained. Gacy, with the straightest of faces, blamed it on sewage, and no one suspected a thing. Even as boys vanished, Gacy threw barbecues in the same backyard, bodies buried just inches beneath his smiling guests. Because psychopaths don't just kill, they blend in.
Never a sound, not a sound, never. Not even, like they've asked about screaming or anything. Never a sound out of that house. It's always been a quiet house.
Gacy proved the most deceptive monsters don't hide in shadows. They shake your hand, charm your kids, laugh with a beer in hand while standing on the graves of your loved ones.
Terry, the horrible truth to suburban contractor John Gacy's rambling statements to police last week is becoming more and more evident with each passing day. 6 more bodies unearthed from the basement crawl space of Gacy's Norwood Park Township home today, bringing to 15 the number found there since Friday.
When police finally unearthed his secrets, 29 bodies lay beneath the house. 33 victims in just 6 years, all boys between 14 and 21. But even more frightening than the numbers was the calculated mind behind them. John Wayne Gacy murdered with an ice-cold precision. He didn't kill in fits of rage. He killed with a chilling calmness. Gacy's emotions were shut off, letting him murder without the slightest internal resistance. He saw himself as special, above the law and smarter than everyone else. He even wore his victims' clothes under his business suit. Not out of lust or sentiment, but because he believed he could get away with it. His self-perception was grandiose and delusional. He saw himself as untouchable, not hiding from the law, but playing games with it. The arrogance he displayed was truly psychotic. So much so that he didn't see the world through a moral lens. Right and wrong meant nothing, only what he wanted. He chose runaways and sex workers, believing no one would look for them. They weren't people, they were disposable.
Just cruising around. I would pull up at the light, he nodded to me, I nodded back to him. I pulled over to the side, he got in the car. He was looking for money and was interested in getting into having some fun.
His worldview was completely dehumanized. People were objects, tools to use, control, or discard. In Gacy's world, only he mattered. His thought patterns were twisted to protect his ego. After each murder, he told himself the victims let him do it, that their deaths were accidents, and he truly believed it.
He put the handcuffs on himself. Okay, I of course expounded further on him getting blown, and he didn't like the idea.
He distorted reality to dodge blame. Every death had to be someone else's fault. Every kill somehow justified. The more he murdered, the more normal it became. But the most terrifying part? While bodies piled up, Gacy performed as Pogo the Clown, laughing with sick kids, shaking hands with politicians. His behavior was highly manipulative, cold, and calculated. He hid his darkness and perverted impulses by weaponizing his charm to make people trust him. When police finally caught Gacy in 1978, he didn't confess or show emotion. He got irritated, like someone had interrupted his day. Even on trial, he showed no regret, just anger that his game was over. And that's the chilling truth.
Hey, I got news for you. I killed 33 times. You're only gonna kill me once. Gacy outsmarted him again.
Gacy wasn't insane. He knew exactly what he was doing, and he loved it. Once the police had torn through his house, the neighborhood would never be the same. Parents who had once laughed at his clown acts now collapsed on their lawns in agony. Families of missing boys got calls no one should ever receive. 33 victims, 29 under his home, the rest dumped like garbage in nearby rivers. But the horror didn't end there. Some mothers couldn't look at their floorboards again, remembering what was found under his. Fathers jumped at every strange smell, wondering how they'd missed the signs. A community learned too late that monsters don't need fangs, just face paint. John Wayne Gacy is one of the most notorious serial killers the world has ever seen, a cold-blooded, psychopathic murderer. But the thing with psychopathy is that it comes in different shapes and sizes. Instead of a clown outfit, some people choose a suit. And instead of killing in a small area like Gacy did, some people take the meaning of horror to whole new levels on a national stage. This psychopath promised to revolutionize medicine. Investors handed her billions. The media crowned her the next Steve Jobs. But behind the black turtleneck and deep voice lay a dangerous truth. She wasn't a genius. She was a con artist. While Gacy hid behind clown paint, Elizabeth Holmes wore a different mask, one of Silicon Valley prestige. Her victims weren't found beneath floorboards, but in hospital waiting rooms, holding test results that never worked. The question wasn't whether or not she'd get caught, but how many lives would be ruined beyond recognition before she did. Elizabeth began as a 19-year-old Stanford dropout with a vision to make blood testing faster, cheaper, and painless. But that vision became an obsession, and that obsession became a lie. She had the perfect Silicon Valley fairy tale, a deep voice modeled after Steve Jobs.
Over the last 11 years, we've reinvented the traditional laboratory infrastructure.
A wardrobe of black turtlenecks and a $9 billion company called Theranos. She charmed politicians, billionaires, and generals, convincing them her tech could run hundreds of tests on a single drop of blood. There was one big problem. It didn't work. Behind the scenes, Theranos was crumbling. Engineers who raised concerns were fired. Whistleblowers were silenced. Holmes faked demos, secretly using competitor machines. Real patients received test results so inaccurate they suffered serious harm. This was ambition turned toxic. Holmes didn't just cut corners. She built an entire fantasy. She kept pushing even as scientists begged her to stop, even as patients' lives were at risk. Because for psychopaths, reality is whatever they can convince others to see. And for a long, dangerous period of time, Elizabeth had the entire world fooled. At the peak of her fraud, Holmes operated with a chilling focus. While Gacy hid bodies under floorboards, she hid lies behind PowerPoint slides. Her emotional state was disturbingly flat. She didn't panic. She didn't break. Even as her company crumbled, she showed no concern for the lives at risk, only her image. This is true emotional detachment in its most dangerous form. Holmes believed she was changing the world, not just a CEO, but a visionary. A chosen figure misunderstood by lesser minds. Her self-perception was grandiose and delusional. She thought rules didn't apply to her, that the ends justified any means, and critics simply couldn't see her vision. In her eyes, people were tools or threats. Whistleblowers were traitors.
Yeah, that was extremely tough. You know, this whole saga has taken a financial, emotional, and tolls on my relationships. And the toll that I took on my grandfather's relationship was probably the worst.
Engineers were obstacles. Patients were statistics. Her worldview was brutally utilitarian, a reality where ethics came second and lives were just collateral damage. Her thought patterns were equally disturbing. She bent facts, lied, faked test results, falsified demos, and told herself the vision was still real, that critics didn't understand.
Welcome back, everybody. Blood testing firm Theranos is formally dissolving, but that is not the final chapter in this story.
When the truth surfaced, she didn't adjust, she attacked. Her brain wasn't wired for doubt, only domination. Her behavior was surgical. Behind the black turtlenecks and rehearsed speeches was someone who manipulated trust with terrifying ease.
At the highest level, we didn't have the right leadership in the laboratory, and we didn't have the implementation of the quality system in terms of procedures.
She knew when to flatter, when to threaten, and when to cry on cue. One moment, she was convincing generals and investors they were seeing the future. The next, ordering evidence destroyed with a calm smile. The terrifying truth about Elizabeth Holmes wasn't that she failed. It was how close she came to succeeding. She proved that psychopathy doesn't always come with a clown mask. Sometimes it's wearing a black turtleneck at the front of a multi-billion-dollar lie. As you can imagine, Elizabeth lost everything. The woman once worth billions got sentenced to 11 years in prison, now without a dollar to her name. Her company collapsed. Her marriage ended. The world that worshipped her as the next Steve Jobs now saw her as a fraud. But the real victims? The people who trusted her.
There's this man who goes by the initials RC right now in Arizona, who is suggesting that the lab results that he got from Theranos were not accurate, and it led to him having a heart attack. Based on what you know, is it possible that what he's saying is true? Could he have gotten a lab result that was so askew that he didn't act on it, and then a month later he ended up having a heart attack?
I'm not the lab director, and so...
The patients that got wrong test results, changing their lives forever. Some missed cancer diagnoses because her machines said they were healthy. Others missed heart defects or got false alarms that had terrifying consequences. Investors lost fortunes. Employees who believed in her mission lost their jobs and their faith in Silicon Valley. And that's the scary truth about psychopaths. They don't care who gets hurt as long as they get what they want. Gacy killed with his hands. Holmes killed with her lies. But what happens when a psychopath kills with something even more powerful than that? What happens when a psychopath kills with belief? They joined for peace, for purpose, for something to believe in. Young students, doctors, and engineers, all drawn to a soft-spoken guru who promised spiritual awakening in a collapsing world. They gave up money, careers, even their names, convinced they'd found salvation. But behind the chanting in white robes was a man building a death cult. Not for power, not for politics, but for the apocalypse. Because some psychopaths don't just want your trust, they want your soul. Shoko Asahara was born nearly blind into a poor family in rural Japan. At a school for the blind, he quickly learned to dominate weaker students, using fear and manipulation to get what he wanted. That hunger for control never left. After dabbling in fraudulent healing, Asahara reinvented himself in the 1980s as a spiritual guru. He claimed to levitate, read minds, and be the reincarnation of Christ and Buddha. Japan's economic collapse left many searching for meaning. Asahara offered purpose, salvation, and fear. His cult, Aum Shinrikyo, blended religion, sci-fi, and apocalypse. Followers gave up homes, families, even their identities. The more they sacrificed, the holier they became. Some drank his bathwater, believing it held divine energy. But this wasn't enlightenment. It was submission. Asahara demanded total obedience. Critics disappeared. Devotees were tortured into loyalty. And behind the incense and chants, the cult stockpiled weapons. By the early 1990s, Asahara wasn't just leading a religion. He was building an army ready to kill for the man they called a god. At the height of his power, Shoko Asahara no longer saw himself as human. He believed he was a divine being chosen to purify the world through destruction. His ego was untouchable, and that made him uniquely dangerous. Asahara's emotional state was frighteningly hollow. He showed no empathy, not even those who worshipped him. Devotion was expected, pain was justified, and death was necessary. To him, the apocalypse wasn't tragic, it was sacred, and he would be its conductor. His self-perception was pure delusion and ego. He didn't see himself as flawed. He saw himself as the chosen one, a messiah destined to cleanse the world. His identity fused with this fantasy so completely the line between belief and narcissism vanished. His worldview had totally collapsed into black and white as well, good versus evil, with him at the center. The good were his followers, stripped of identity and conscience. The evil were outsiders, critics, journalists, politicians, civilians, anyone who challenged him. Their lives meant nothing. Asahara's thought patterns were cold, methodical, and detached. He didn't rant or lash out. He planned like a military strategist. He collected death the way a businessman might calculate profit. And shockingly, none of it felt insane to him. His madness had logic. It just existed in a broken moral universe. And his behavior reflected this terrifying difference. In public, he wore robes, quoted scripture, and spoke softly. Behind closed doors, he tortured dissenters, stockpiled weapons, and built chemical labs to manufacture nerve gas. He ruled through hierarchy, where his every word was law. His followers drank his bathwater, bought his blood, treated his body waste as sacred. He didn't lead a cult. He engineered a machine of worship and destruction.
A frightening development this morning. A chemical weapon, nerve gas, was released inside a crowded subway system in Tokyo today, and police say it was a deliberate attack by terrorists.
Authorities have identified it as sarin, a poisonous nerve gas developed in the 1930s in Nazi Germany.
When he ordered the 1995 Tokyo subway attack, it wasn't desperation, it was execution. To him, killing civilians was sacred cleansing. A step toward the apocalypse so he could be reborn as its ruler. Even after the attack, Asahara showed no remorse.
They've collected hundreds of tons so far, all the chemicals needed to make sarin. Police say enough to kill millions. And they have established a scientific link between the sarin traces found on the compound and the subway attack.
He rambled about visions, ignored evidence, and mumbled mantras in court. Never acknowledged guilt. Never recognized the humanity of his victims. This was psychopathy in its purest form. Not chaotic rage, but calculated detachment. A belief that the world must be reshaped, no matter the cost. And that he, and only he, had the right to do it. The Tokyo subway attack shattered Japan's sense of safety. 13 dead, thousands injured. Survivors lived with seizures, blindness, and trauma that never healed. First responders developed chronic illnesses. And across the country, faith itself became something to fear. Asahara was arrested and sentenced to death, but even behind bars, he never apologized. He refused to speak and refused to explain. His cult fractured but never disappeared, changing names, hiding in plain sight, still recruiting. The true damage was deeper than scars or statistics. Ordinary people, doctors, students, parents had carried out the killings. And a nation that prided itself on order was forced to ask, how did this happen here?
Shoko Asahara, the leader of the doomsday cult behind the deadly 1995 nerve gas attack on the Tokyo subway system, was executed by hanging on Friday.
Asahara died in 2018, but the fear he created still lingers. Because when belief becomes blind and power goes unchecked, even peace can be poisoned. And that leads to the most chilling truth of all. Psychopaths don't wear warning labels. Gacy hid behind face paint. Holmes behind a black turtleneck, Asahara behind scripture, but they all shared one thing, an empty view of humanity. People weren't people, they were objects, flesh for power, blood for profit, souls for delusion, And our only defense? To look even closer. Because the most dangerous psychopaths don't scare you, they make you trust them. And what if the lies aren't just out there, but inside your own head? Click here to explore the Mandela effect and how fragile memory really is. Thanks for watching.